Good evening, friends.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hello. Let a few people still coming in. We're going to be continuing with our learning of the laws of Shabbat. We were talking about just the laws of coming into Shabbat, right? When Shabbat enters, and we were specifically in the kitchen talking about the kinds of how are you to keep your food warm for Shabbat, and we're still sort of pre-Shabbat. We're not yet at the point in which Shabbat has come in. It's important because there are different methods, right, to keep your food warm, and you need to know how to do it and how not to do it. What we discussed last time was the idea that there are two rabbinic principles here that are problematic that we need to avoid. The first is a mechze k'mevasha, it looks like you're cooking. And that anything, even if you're not actually doing the cooking at that time, if it's the same essential method as a normal way of cooking, so it's prohibited rabbinically because of marit ayin, it looks prohibited. And so someone who sees you doing it might think that you're allowed to cook. Or something of that regard. So that means that we said no leaving food in the oven with the oven on. That if the oven is on, so you're not allowed to leave food in the oven on Shabbat because of that, because that's the normal way of cooking. You're not allowed to do it. Similarly, you're not allowed to have food on the stove. With the stove on. Those are both problematic because they're normal ways of cooking. We talked about that also with the microwave. The other side of it that we talked about was that you might come to patchki with it, right? To stoke the coals, as they Now today we don't usually cook with coals, but it's the same essential idea. Right, that we don't want you to be doing something which might lead you to adjust the flame or to do anything which is going to be manipulating and which would cause it to heat more or to cook faster, because as soon as you make it cook faster, you're essentially cooking on Shabbat. Just bringing up our section, I think we were in chapter 72. Okay. Share the screen. We talked about the permissibility of putting up the cholent, right? That either the food needs to already be cooked to the point of being edible, in which case you're not actually cooking it on Shabbat because it's already cooked, or it needs to be completely raw and for lunch and not for the evening meal. If it's something which is completely raw and for lunch, so the assumption is that you're not going to come to be worried that it's not going to cook fast enough because you've sort of forgotten about it until tomorrow. And then that's okay. So when you have a cholent, something of that sort, those are the two options. One is to have it be cooked to the point of being edible before Shabbat, and the other is to have it be still totally raw, so that you're not going to come to manipulate the fire in order to have it ready for the Friday night meal, because this is for the daytime meal. Okay, so here we're at the part now. I'm just gonna mute everyone just so we lose, so we don't have the background noise. If you have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself. I'm here starting to hear some background noise. Okay. So here it's saying what's an important thing. We're getting ready, right? Like we're coming right up to Shabbat now. Sort of last things before we're going to light the candles. So before dark on Friday, you should gently ask your household, did you separate challah? And did you tell them to light the Shabbat? And then you should tell them to light the Shabbat candles. Meaning, separating challah is something you're not allowed to do on Shabbat, right? The other thing that's in the Mishnah that's not brought here is the eruv. Nowadays, we have the big communal eruv, which allows us to carry on Shabbat, that Rabbi Rosenblatt and or I check every week to make sure it's intact. So you don't have to be worried about that. We're sort of taking care of that. There are two other kinds of eruvim. Right? There's an eruv tafshilim, which is really only relevant to Yom Tov. That's what allows us to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbat or from one day of Yom Tov to the next. And the other kind of eruv is called an eruv techumin. I don't know how you would define that. An eruv which sort of establishes your center of where you're allowed to walk somewhere else. Right? We were talking that one of the prohibitions of Shabbat, it says in the Torah, Al Yetzei Ish min Komo b'Yom Shabbat, that no person should leave their place on Shabbat. So one of the things that entails is that from where you began Shabbat, you have a very limited area. They didn't want us to be just walking, traveling on Shabbat. So they said from where you start Shabbat, you're not allowed to go. They say about a kilometer in any direction. So you have if you're outside of a city, right? If you're in a city, so you have a kilometer around the city. The entire city is therefore your place. But if you're not in a city, you're out in the camping or wherever you might be. So you have only a certain distance that you're allowed to walk, and what you can do is you can set up your food somewhere else within that kilometer, and then that food becomes your center point. So if you wanted to go somewhere that was 2 kilometers away from where you are, if you set up your center point halfway, so that makes it that you're able to go from where you're here to there because you've moved your center point. Why am I bringing this up? Because setting up this eruv is also something that's prohibited on Shabbat. That you're not allowed to make the eruv on Shabbat. And so the sense of the Mishnah tells us, and here he's quoting the Mishnah except for the middle part, right? He says, did you separate challah or did you take the masrot? If we're in Eretz Yisrael and you need to remove certain tithes for the Kohanim and the Levim, you have to do that before Shabbat. So a person should always ask and make sure that, last things, right? So the Mishnah says, have you taken the tithes? Have you made the eruv? Okay, so light the candles. And the sense is before starting Shabbat, you should take a moment to see if there's anything I've forgotten. And similarly, here's the next one. You must examine your clothes on Friday before dark to see whether a needle is stuck in them or if there's anything in the pockets. Now, most of us don't carry needles around in our clothes anymore. Perhaps someone who's involved in a seamstress, or someone who's in a textile profession may have clothes or pins or something. But there's certainly pockets is something that, you don't want to be in a situation where you're going to be walking and you've discovered that you have money in your pocket, right? It's always nice to find money in your pocket that you didn't know was there, except on Shabbat, right? Because then you're not allowed to carry it, and it becomes a problem if you don't have an eruv. What are you supposed to do? You're not allowed to carry on Shabbat. So they said that it's very important that before Shabbat starts, last thing, you got to check your pockets, make sure you're not carrying anything. I think this is such a good metaphor. When we're coming into Shabbat, are you still carrying something from the week? Are you still schlepping around your business, your work, your concerns, whatever it is that you're doing from the week? check to make sure to put it all down. I think that it can be also sort of psycho-emotionally as well as physically to really say, okay, I'm coming into Shabbos. Is there anything else that I need to do or think about or worry about now while I still can, so that I'll be able to really be free of it on Shabbos? We don't want you just schlepping around your business right on Shabbos. You want to be free of that. So it's important before Shabbos to take stock of yourself and really be able to say, have I done everything I needed to do? Did I give the tithes? Did I become a giver? Did I make shared space? With the eruv, did I let go of my weekday things? And so that I can really be in Shabbos. This is something so simple, and yet it happens again and again and again. That you find yourself carrying something that you didn't realize was there. You have a pen in your pocket, whatever it might be. But I think also, again, spiritually, emotionally, am I really ready to let go of all that stuff and come into Shabbos? It's so important. Okay, now we're talking, before we get into some other things about the Shabbos candles, he's still going to talk about now, what are you allowed to do? What are you allowed to have someone do for you over Shabbat? Right, that we're not allowed to have non-Jews working for us per se on Shabbat. They have to be working for themselves, self-interest. And so the problem, right, if you, like we talked about this, if you have a gardener coming who comes every, once a week or whatever, they really shouldn't come on Shabbat. Let me see just 1 second if I can find the other chapter I wanted, because I would rather stick to the practical stuff. So I wanted to do Shabbos candles.
Chapter 75, Rabbi?
Yeah, that's what we're pulling up. Thank you. Okay. So now we're sort of coming into Shabbos. We want to really start Shabbos. Every person must put all work aside and light the Shabbos candles at least half an hour before the stars come out. Half an hour before the stars come out. That's significantly later than we generally hold. We generally are a little bit more stringent than that, and we try to make it 18 minutes before sunset. Right, 18 minutes before sunset. So and sunset is around 50 minutes before nightfall. So we're talking about just a little more than an hour before nightfall, and here he says half an hour. It's not clear that he means, that's sort of the last moment. Midoraita, on the Torah level, Shabbat officially, it's only really Shabbat biblically from this time of Tzeit HaKochavim, right? That the official end of the day and beginning of the next day is when we make Havdalahs, the 3 stars, and not when the sun goes down. And the time in between when the sun goes down and the 3 stars is what they call Bein HaShmashot, which quite literally means between the suns. But the idea is that this is the intermediary time. It's not clear. And since the moment of the 3 stars is not exactly clear when it is, it's a judgment call and depends on how much light there is. If you're in the city, then it'll take longer for you to be able to see the stars. If you're in the country, you'll be able to see them earlier because there's less human source light. So all of these things. So they wanted to be very, very careful. And so they sort of extended rabbinically that we want to extend it from the time that the sun goes down. Right? From the time you can no longer see the orb of the sun in the sky. So that's what we call shkia or sunset. So rabbinically, that's the time that we've sort of taken on to to start Shabbat. The difficulty is that the amount of time between when the stars are visible and when the sun disappears is dependent on your altitude and your longitude. Right? If you're way up north, you can have a much longer period, whereas when you're by the equator, the sun disappears and it's dark real quick. And so when he says it's about half an hour, that's probably in a more tropical climate than we are here in Vancouver, and that our period is between the sun disappearing from the sky and the ability to see 3 stars is quite a bit longer. So it's appropriate that we should don't take this that we want to be a little more stringent and separate ourselves from work and be prepared to keep Shabbat. By Shkia at the very latest. And so when we publish on the Shari Tzedek website or on the calendar, the candle lighting times, it's usually going to be 18 minutes before Shkia. Now in the summertime, we bring in Shabbos significantly earlier, right? That if you would wait until Shkia, we wouldn't make Shabbos until 9 o'clock, right? These days we're davening Mincha. It's not yet dark. We're davening Mincha at 9 o'clock, so that's just too late for people. So you're allowed to bring in Shabbos significantly earlier. So now, right, this week on Friday we had candle lighting at like 7:45. So that's significantly earlier. There's a time called Plag HaMincha, is sort of the 3/4 point of the time that you're allowed to daven Mincha. And from that time onward, you're allowed to bring in Shabbat. Right? That's sort of the earliest you can bring in Shabbat. So when we publish earlier Shabbat times, like now in the summer, so those candle lighting times are approximately the point when we're going to get in the davening to saying Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat, right? That we'll have, because that's when the community officially takes in Shabbat. And when the community takes in Shabbat, if you're part of the community, so you have to also take in Shabbat at that time. Okay, so again, we don't want to take this half an hour too literally. Now, the question that sometimes comes of, what if I missed, 18 minutes? Can I still light the candles? Is it better to not light the candles, right? Because you have this sort of a situation where it's a rabbinic prohibition, and not to light the candles after Shkia, and it's a rabbinic commandment to light the candles. So which takes precedence? So the sense is, because they're both rabbinic, if they said don't do it, they knew what they're talking about. You shouldn't. So it's very important. But there are people in the world who are make a point, and it's of going later. Of saying, no, it's okay. There's still room at the time. And so in a real emergency situation, as long as it's not yet, here he says half an hour before, so maybe there's still room that you could, as a very sort of last layer, but if you really want to try and avoid that, if you can. And here he says, "V'im amru b'vei knesset mizmor shir yom Shabbat, af al pi shedayin yesh 2 sha'ot ad halayla mikom makom chal Shabbat al hamu'at v'asrim b'chol melachot." This is very important. This is what I was just saying. If we get to the place in the davening as a community where our minyan is, we've said Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat, right? That's after Lechadodi, sort of right between Kabbalat Shabbat and Ma'ariv on the Friday night. Even though there's still up to 2 hours left before the night, nevertheless, Shabbat has come upon the minority of the community, I mean, even the people who are not in Shul. And then you have to keep Shul, you have to keep Shabbos from the time that the community gets there. Now, a lot of people don't know this. This is a very common mistake. And they figure, look, I'm coming home. They're going to daven early. I'm not going to daven early. I'll bring in Shabbos when the sun goes down. I can drive my car until 8:30. That's not really the case. Now, there are, situations in which if there is a minyan that's going to be davening at that time, right? If you have a minyan that's going to daven at 9 o'clock, so then you can say, I'm going to go with that minyan. But when there isn't a late minyan, and the only minyanim in town are the earlier the earlier time. So you're bound by that. And this is a very, very common mistake that many people just don't know. So that's why we're here. And so that the time that we publish on our calendar is a time that our minyan is going to get to Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat, and it's very much appropriate that you should try and keep Shabbat, begin Shabbat at that time. Again, as I've mentioned many times, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch doesn't have different colors or different fonts for what's the Oraita and what's the Rabbanan. This is still in the world of the Rabbanan, right? That this is a rabbinic requirement that you keep Shabbat. It makes sense that it's rabbinic, right? It's about following the rabbis, the community, and so. But again, we're rabbinic Jews today. We don't, and to say I don't hold by the rabbinic, that's a much bigger problem, than bringing in Shabbos a little bit late. Even if you come from another city and you come to our town, then as soon as they say in this shul, they say Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat, it's Shabbos in that place, right? So so that's important. But here it says, but in a place where there's two shuls, one doesn't have to be drawn by the other. That's why if there is a late minyan, so you're okay. Then you can keep the later time. So it's important, if you want to have that, I don't know what the davening times are. The different. We have a lot of shuls in town. They have the Kolel and they have the Chabad at 41st. There's Beit HaMidrash. So it would be perhaps helpful to have a combined calendar when everybody's davening. But it's important to know that because at the very least you're bound by the latest one of those, and not only by the sun. Okay. Mitzvah laharbot b'nerot, the Chod Shabbat. It's an important mitzvah. It's a thing to have lots of candles by night, by Shabbos, for the honor of Shabbos. Keeping in mind that this was written at the time when candles was the only really, they didn't have electric lights yet. So the sense of why they instituted the mitzvah of Shabbos candles was what they say for Shalom Bayit, to have peace in the home. The sense of when you can't see, it's not as peaceful. People get they're irritated, they're scared. People are not as calm, and there's something calming and peaceful about the candlelight. And the more light, the better, right? The more light. So they say mitzvah l'arbos b'neros l'chvod Shabbat. Now in our day, when we have all kinds of electric lights, LEDs, this and that, it's not clear that you need to have candles dafka, right? That they don't need to be candles. The idea is that you shouldn't have your home be poorly lit. That you want your home to be illuminated and beautiful and be able to see. On the other hand, if you've never had a Shabbos table, only by candlelight, where there's no electric lights and it's all just candles, there's nothing like it. The sense of the Shabbos feel is just so thick. It's such a lovely sense, and when you have lots of candles and the room is well lit and you get the smell of the candles, it enhances the Shabbat experience terrifically. So classically, they had three different meals on Shabbat. They were all lit differently. Right? At the evening meal, you have candlelight. By the morning, they're burnt out, but there's the light of the sun. Right? You're in daylight. And in the Shalosh Shudas already, it's getting dark, and people will sit and into the dark. And there's something about that, which is appropriate for Sudah Shlishi. So this is one of these things where we may be able to circumvent, the halacha as it is written because of modern technology. But we miss out on some of the real palpable, sensual, the sense experience of Shabbat, where it really stimulates your eyes are different, your nose is different. The entire the entire experience of Shabbat, when it's just lit by candles, is extraordinary. So there are those who have the minhag to light 10, and some who light to 7. It says, but at the very least, a person should not have less than 2, right? That you should have not just 1 candle, but 2 candles. Neged Zachor v'Shamor, and they say because we have two parts of the mitzvah of Shabbos, right? One is Zachor Yom HaShabbat, you have to remember the Shabbat, and that's the sort of the side of consciousness, of awareness, of knowing it's Shabbos, right? The what you put into it, and then there's a side of protection, of Shamor, which means to guard Shabbat, that your actions not be prohibited, that you have to protect the Shabbos by not doing harm to her. Right, and they're not doing any work, and so for those two sides of it, so we have the 2 candles. And it says you should, really it's worthwhile to have beautiful candles. Never yafim. You don't want it to. It's not about technical. It's not a technical light. That this again is the experience is enhanced by the candles just as much as by the light, or even perhaps even more. Today we're so used to accustomed to having light that it's not such a it's not such a big deal, right? That people in the old days, they wouldn't light candles at night on Tuesday. It's dark, you go to sleep. The sense of there's a luxury, an indulgence of having a candle lit on Shabbat. Again, our modern technology perhaps saps some of the specialness from it. Now, what's important to know is that
Rabbi,
yeah.
we're supposed to look at the candles and be close to the Shabbos table when we're reading Kiddush, right? There should be that glow of the
The
candle.
Shabbat candles should be lit ideally where you're going in the room where you're going to be eating your Shabbat meal. That's correct. There isn't a mitzvah to look at the Shabbat candle the way there is perhaps with Hanukkah, right? The Shabbat candles are meant to be useful, right? The light is there so we don't trip over each other, right? So there is a sense of that we're allowed to use that light and for it to help us to function. Whereas Hanukkah, we're not allowed to even do minimal, it's not a functional light. It's just for enjoyment, just to sit there and be beautiful. Whereas Shabbos candles are also functional. So it's not necessary that there's a thing specifically about looking at them as opposed to, using the light. But certainly the idea is that we want it to be visible and part of the Shabbat experience. And so the idea is to have the Shabbat candles, in the room where you're having a Shabbat meal. Now, I was saying that in a prickly situation where you don't have candles, where you don't have the opportunity to light, sometimes in a hotel room or a hospital room, they won't allow you to have a candle. So what do you do for Shabbat candles? So it's well thought of that an incandescent bulb is certainly kosher for Shabbat candles. And so you can, just turn on the light and have an electric light bulb as your Shabbat candles. You can still make a bracha on it. It loses some of the experiential side of it, but it's perfectly kosher. And again, since the institution of the Shabbat candles was also to be functional and helpful, so you're still doing it, right? And so you can use the electric lights if possible. But here it says there should be intention to make it something beautiful, which is going to be part of the experience. We don't want it to be just technical. As Rav Huna said, a person who endeavors to make their Shabbos candles beautiful will have children who are Talmidei Chachamim, right? That they're going to have wise, learned children. As it says, the Ner mitzvah and the Torah is the light. Candle is a mitzvah candle, and the Torah is the light. Ner mitzvah, a mitzvah is a candle, the Torah and the Torah is light. So the sense of what is the mitzvah candle? The Shabbos candle. So if you have beautiful Shabbos candles, so you'll have lots of Torah, in your house. You'll have a love of Torah. And I think that's really, there's something that's really true. When you have the candlelit Shabbos, Torah is magical. It's an enchanting experience. And so then, you have the love of Torah that could come from that. Okay, right? From the fact that you have a mitzvah candle, so you have Torah light. And so similarly, it's appropriate that you should daven, while lighting the candles, that Hashem should give us children that are going to be luminaries of Torah, right? That they're going to bring great light to the world. In the sense of I sent it out the other day on Friday, right? Getting ready for Halacha. In Parshat Halacha, we read about the lighting of the menorah and how that brings light into the world. Right? But what does God need that light? God's not going to trip over anything, in the base of Mikdash. He doesn't have light. Right? So Rashi says, what does God need the light? Rather, it's a testimony that the Shekhinah dwells with Am Yisrael. Right? That light is a sense of that God is with us. Like Yehudim Haita Ora. Right? So that was light is always a reference to Torah. And that our Torah that we bring to the world, the new Torahs that we all can bring to the world, it brings illumination to the world. So while we're bringing that light in through the mitzvah of Shabbos candles, it's an appropriate time to daven that we should have children. And it's not only children. You can daven for yourself to have wonderful Torah ideas too, and for your friends and for everybody. It's really an appropriate moment as we light these candles. We're bringing the light of Shabbos into the world to daven that Hashem should also send in the new light. That's the new Torah for the week, for the year, for the world. That this is the moment where new Torah can emerge. And he says that it's appropriate they should give a little money to tzedakah before light the candles. That again, that sort of gets us in the mode of giving. That there's a way in which we could be lighting candles, and what we're really doing is we're taking. I want to have a nice Shabbos in my house, and I'm going to have it my way. So I'm going to light lots of candles so I don't trip over myself, and it's nice for me. Okay, you're still doing the mitzvah. But the mitzvah is so much more powerful if you can move into the place of giving, right? Where the light that I'm bringing to the world, I want it to give to the world, and it should illuminate our family and the community and all the people who are suffering, and just to get into that place when you're doing any mitzvah, doing it from a place of giving and awakening that benevolence which is inherent in each of our souls. Okay, now it says, a person who's having a hard time with raising their children, or has no children. Yeah, and it really, the truth is, it goes for anything that a person really is lacking and feels a void in their heart, right? There's something that you're yearning for. This is a very potent moment for prayer. And there are in Sidurim, there's this Art Scroll has a women's Sidur that has a very lengthy section of prayer, for lighting the candles. And there are extra prayers in the Art Scroll Sidurim and in other Sidurim, there's even more, that this is sort of recognized as a really opportune moment. The transition into Shabbat, bringing this light into the world. The gates are open, and it's a really a proper time to pray, for everything that you need, but really also to pray for other people, to be in that place of giving and bringing light to the world. So he says that for a person who has a hard time raising their children, who doesn't have children, it's a powerful moment to say after you lit the candles, to read the Haftarah of the first day of Rosh Hashanah. So what's the first day of Rosh Hashanah Haftarah? Anybody know? It's the story of Hannah. Hannah is the mother of Shmuel.
It's First Samuel, right, Rabbi?
That's right. That's right at the very beginning of Sefer Shmuel. Right at the beginning of First Samuel. And it's the story of how we learn how to pray from Hannah. Right? That Hannah would come every year for Rosh Hashanah and offer a sacrifice with her family. And she didn't have children. And her her husband's other wife, had lots of children, and she was barren, and it pained her greatly. And the story in the Haftarah is so moving because she just goes and she just pours out her heart and she's praying to God, from the simplicity of her heart. And then Eli, the high priest, comes and says, you shouldn't daven drunk. He thinks she's drunk. And he says, no, I'm not drunk. I'm just overflowing with emotion. And Eli sees that and then, says, oh, may Hashem grant your wish. And then that's the prayer that brought Shmuel into the world. And Shmuel, of course, is the one who anointed David, and it's like the herald of Mashiach, in the same way that we're waiting for Eliyahu Hanavi. I say that Eliyahu Hanavi will be the herald of the Melech HaMashiach. So Shmuel was the herald of King David, was the Mashiach. He was in that generation. He was the prophet that anointed him. So you see that this is the moment of simple prayer, right? That it's a moment of an Ezrat Son, a time when God's in a good mood, as it were, and the gates of prayer are wide open. So anyone who has when you have special prayers, that's a really powerful time, right? You should light the candles and you make the bracha, and then as you're right in those first moments. Some people say even that to make all those prayers before you make the bracha, right? When you light the candles and then you cover your eyes, and in that moment of covering your eyes, that's the time to say all those prayers, right? The candle is lit, and and you're not quite there yet, right? It's the last second, So in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, it tells us that there were these several miraculous items, right? Things that were created at the very last second before Shabbos, right? And they were all miraculous things. Moses' staff, the mouth of the donkey, other things which were, miraculous things that are created right at that moment, right before Shabbat. So it's a time of miracles, right? It's a time when anything is possible. So it's a very, very, nuclear moment to daven. Yeah, Chris, Dan.
Just a question about, you mentioned about covering your eyes. Like when Chris lights the Shabbat candles and she and Ruthie covers her eyes, in the Orthodox world, do men cover their eyes when the woman says the Bruja?
That's a wonderful question. It's certainly appropriate that you could, certainly allowed, but it's appropriate, even if you're not saying the bracha, that you're doing it along with it, right? When, just another example, when it's on Rosh Hashanah, we're talking about Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, when the Baal Tokea, the one who's going to be blowing the shofar, makes the bracha, right? He's standing up, everybody stands up. In some communities they sit down, but the sense is we want to do what they're doing. There's halachot about this. This is what you've ever seen. When people make kiddush, right? And before they drink, they sit down. And so then everybody else should sit down. If somebody's making a bracha, if I'm making a hamotzi, and I'm covering everybody with my hamotzi, and I'm standing up, then everybody else should be standing up. And if I'm sitting down, everybody else should be sitting down. Right? You should be in the same position as the one who's making the bracha that's through which you're performing the mitzvah. So certainly, if and again, lighting the Shabbat candles is primarily something which is priority is given to women, the women of the house to do the mitzvah and to do it on behalf of their husbands as well. But if you remember, right, he started the whole thing, the chayav kol adam, right? That lighting Shabbat candles is a mitzvah on every single person, right? It's not a women's only mitzvah. It's a mitzvah on everybody. But when we have a home which is populated by men and women together, so we give the priority of doing the mitzvah to the women. And so if she's covering her eyes, it's appropriate that you should as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And in general, I think this is a very special moment, right? So to come and to say that, to read that Haftarah, that you could read that already after you open your eyes, but that to read that moment of Chana, and to piggyback off of it. But again, it's more about you offering your prayers than it is about remembering Chana, right? The whole point of reading the Haftarah about Chana is to get you to daven, is to get you to open your heart and pour out your heart like she did. Right? That's why you're reading it, is to inspire you. So, to say, instead of saying my prayers, I'm going to read about Chana, well, you sort of missed the point. So certainly much, I think, if you're feeling tongue-tied and you're perhaps too overwhelmed emotionally to be able to articulate everything in your heart, so you can use Chana's mouth, and her words, but the point there is very clear, is that you want to open your heart, and this is a time to really to daven with all you got. If a tov shetavim mashiyomer, you should know what you're saying. This is not, and I think this is, in general, I'm a big proponent of this in davening, right? That it's not a ritual. It's not a like a sorcery, right? Where we do this, say the magic words and something happens. It's about connection and process and person's, real experience. So here he says it outright, that a person the woman saying this should know what she's saying. She shouldn't just be saying things off in Hebrew and making the sounds. And she should say with kavanah, say with intention. Right? That the purpose here is a real moment of endearment. That this is a very dear moment with Hashem, and therefore the prayers are particularly potent. Okay, so what can you use for your Shabbos kid? So the best thing to do is to use olive oil. This is understood across the board. Olive oil is what was used in the temple, right? The menorah was lit only with extra virgin olive oil. First pressing, cold press.
Rabbi, may I mention though, isn't olive oil such a holy mitzvah to take on, almost like Chalav Israel? We don't take on olive oil if we're gonna light with wax the next day. Olive oil is something that you.
I don't think so. I don't think that there's a sense of if you did it once, you have to do it every time. If you have one opportunity to light with olive oil, so yeah, there are other things that are, questionable where you should spend your money to do this or to do that. Is it better to have, is it a Chalav Yisrael or to light with olive oil? Is it better to,
No, Rabbi, my
to
question.
keep 72 minutes after Shabbos, So, but I don't think there's not a sense of if you do it once, you have to do it every time. That's not the case. If you did it 3 times and you didn't specify that you're not doing it with a commitment, so maybe then there's a sense of you made a commitment through your actions. But when you have an opportunity to do a mitzvah, blue label, so don't pass up on it because you're not going to have it next time. So I think that it's.
The three choices, consistency and taking it on as a commitment, and say you're going to your teacher's house for Shabbos, you're lighting there. What happens if, do you travel with your oil? Do you light there?
If you've made you're saying if you've made the commitment to light with olive oil each time?
Yes.
Yeah, if that's a commitment that you've made, which is above and beyond the call of duty, right, then I think it's you're incumbent upon you to equip yourself to fulfill it.
So when you travel, you take it with you as well.
Yeah, if you're traveling, you're going to be lighting somewhere else, and you've gone, above and beyond. If you've said, for me, this is what I'm going to do. So, I think that across the board, if you want to go on a especially high level of hidur mitzvah, right? So then it's a responsibility that you're taking on. You don't put that on somebody else to enable you, right? If I want to wear Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, right? So I can do that. I can get Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, and I can put them on every day. But that means if I happen to borrow somebody else's tefillin, they're not incumbent. It's not upon them to give me Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. That's my responsibility.
And number 3, it says here, the most choice manner of fulfilling the mitzvah is.
Yeah, is absolutely is no question that the Shemen Zayit, the olive oil is the best, is the top level, for sure. It's for sure, no question. That's because that was used in the Beis Hamikdash. You know that the statement of significance. You're saying that my house for this Shabbos is a Beis Hamikdash, right? That Hashem is coming to our house for Shabbos. You know that He's going to dwell among us. That's what Shabbos. That's what the Beis Hamikdash was. You know, it was like Shabbos in space, not in space. You know, but in place, right? This holy place. So to take that the sense of holiness, which is for space, and also apply it to time, makes perfect sense. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay. So that best cases you can do is with olive oil, but shemen ragil, regular oil that we call flower oil, right? Bloomin' oil. That's what we call safflower oil, right? That totally fine. Well, all right. So he says the sense of what there's a concern that if you have an oil which is not, which doesn't draw in the wick very well, the concern is that you're going to come to manipulate the candles, right? If it's the kind of thing that makes there's a big, you see sometimes the wick gets a big bulb at the end, you know, of black stuff, right, or something of that sort that it doesn't burn well. So their concern is that you're going to come to manipulate it because you want to have the nice fire. So there are certain oils which are not allowed. The Mishnah about this is we say in Nusach Ashkenaz is right there. We say, you know, right after Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat, we read that Mishnah, and there it says that all of the different oils are okay as long as they burn well, right? So cottonseed oil and peanut oil and palm oil and avocado oil and almond oil and walnut oil, any of the normal cooking oils that you'll find today, coconut oil, are all fine. They're all fine. It's when you get, you know, when you get to some certain oils, castor oil does not work well. Castor oil is a very thick, sticky oil, and it doesn't work well. Butter does not work. You know, don't try and light Shabbos candles with ghee. You know, clarified butter. It's going to burn. It's going to be. It'll smell nice for the first half an hour, and it'll smell awful once it really burns. You know, so similarly, mineral oil, right? That is not from is not it's not a good smell. Right? So it doesn't burn well. It's not a good smell. So you have to know. But you know, normal oil, safflower oil, cottonseed oil, any of the normal oils that you find in the supermarket is fine, and you can get, you know, the wicks. Right, they have these little floating wicks, or you can make wicks with little cotton. You know, there's a lot of ways to do it. He'll tell us in a moment that wax candles are fine. You know, it's totally fine to use wax candles. It's maybe not as, you know, not as mehuda, right? It's not as this word hadar, right, that they keep using. It's not considered as beautiful.
But beeswax is preferred over all wax, right?
What's that?
Wax, Rabbi, is preferred over all wax?
Oil is preferred over wax?
No, yes, of course. But beeswax candles are preferred over all other wax candles?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, at that point, once you're already at wax, it's like, you know, you know, if you have a particularly nice candle, you know, if you have a candle that you like, right, that is a scented candle, it's fine to use a scented candle for Shabbat. If it makes the house smell good, no problem. Get a nice scented candle, it's totally fine. You know, there's to a large degree what they call hidur, right? This beautification or elegance is subjective. You know, so the point is you should do something that burns well and burns cleanly and doesn't require you. It's not going to, you know, make you want to, you know, poke the candle to make sure everything's going right. You know, you want something that is low maintenance and beautiful. That's the main point. You know, that's the main point. And the more you can make it beautiful, the more it can enhance your Shabbat, the more, right, the more powerful the mitzvah is. But it's, the stories in the Holocaust of when they had, threads of their uniform in margarine or pork, what do you call it, lard, right? That they would make candles out of lard, just because anything, a Shabbos candle in Auschwitz, the glory shining from that, beats your olive oil any day, right? Because the sense of the emotional content and how much it means to you, that's what he do it, right? That's the enhancement of your experience by that candle. That's what counts, that's what counts. So you want something that's going to make it's going to be a nice enhancement of the experience. If you're relating it to it as sort of a technical requirement, you use your little tea candles, fine, you've done your mitzvah. You've done the mitzvah, it's technically your yotze, everything is fine, you make your bracha, no problem. And it's just a question, but nevertheless, the more it can be a hadar, the more it can be elegant and enhance your experience, the better. The wicks should be either of cotton or of linen or of hemp or other things which draw the which wick well. Synthetic fibers don't wick very well, so it's not going to be. It's again, if it doesn't wick well, if it doesn't draw the oil, so you're going to come to poke it, and that's what we want to avoid. And so therefore he says that there's some that are not. So if you're not sure about the candle that you have, if it's going to be a good candle, you can test it out, try it out, burn it for 10 minutes. There's not a thing where the candle has to be new. You don't have to use a brand new candle that's never been lit before. If you have one of these scented candles that burns for a week, and you use it once Shabbos, at the end of Shabbos you blow it out, and you can light it again the next Shabbos. You don't have to use a new candle every time. So certainly you can test the candle as appropriate. You should test the candle to make sure that it burns cleanly and burns well, and so that you don't end up disappointed with it on Shabbos.
I don't understand that statement, sir, because the candle burns out over Shabbos. So are you saying that?
Not if it's a big enough candle. There are plenty of candles out there that'll burn a lot longer than 25 hours.
And what you're saying is after Havdalah, you actually blow out that candle?
You can. You certainly can.
Oh, okay.
Think of it this way: if you're using your electric lights as your Shabbos candles, after Shabbos you're going to turn them off. You're not going to let it burn out right. You're not going to have to wait till the bulb burns out. So once the Shabbat is over, it's totally fine to put it out. So yeah, you can, if you have a scented candle that burns for a very long time, there's no problem using it week after week.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay, when the Binotenu, he says in our country, he was in Hungary. There they would use animal tallow. Okay, you're not going to find that much today. The people don't use that animal fat for candles so much. And it's kosher. But to take a piece of dried fat, right, dried animal fat, and roll it up around the wick and put the wick in, that's not good. Okay, but again, nobody's going to be doing that. So any wax candle is totally fine. Okay, and when you light it, you need to make sure. Here it says, Hamadlig, when you're lighting it, you need to make sure that the wick light until the fire ignites most of the wick protruding from the candle. Now, again, this is not a big thing. We don't usually have candles with a very long wick, right? You have a good wick that's what, an inch maybe, so that's not really a problem today, but it's something to be aware of. Same applies to candles made from tallow or from wax. Fire must ignite most of the wick that protrudes from the candle. Okay, we'll do this quickly. It's well known that every mitzvah we make the bracha before doing the mitzvah. But Shabbos candles is different because as soon as you make the bracha, you've accepted Shabbos. And so then you can't make the bracha first and then light the candle. right? And so therefore, you can't light the candle unless you made the bracha beforehand. So what do? First, we light the candle, and then that's why we cover our eyes. As if to say, I haven't yet seen the Shabbos candles. Right? And so that the act of removing your hands from your eyes is sort of the first moment of benefiting of seeing the Shabbos candles, receiving that Shabbos light. And that's the way we do it, so that the bracha should be before the action. Right? It says that she covers her eyes, puts her hands up over her eyes, and so she doesn't see the candles. And then makes a bracha, and then removes her eyes and sees the candles. And it's as if the bracha was before the lighting. Okay, now this is a big machloket here. And he says, and in order to not deviate and differentiate between Shabbos and Yontif, we do the same thing on Yontif. And this is the minhag, I think, of Chabad, Hasidim, and of certain people. There are other people who say, no. On Yom Tov, you're allowed to use fire. You're allowed, right? So therefore, on Yom Tov, if you have a fire lit, you should make the bracha first, and then light the candle, because you're allowed to do that on Yom Tov. That's a big thing, and you can, either one is okay, but you should be consistent, right? Either you should do it every Yontif, that way, or you should do it like he says here, and be consistent between Shabbos and Yontif. Whichever is going to be more meaningful for you, I don't think it matters much. Okay, the main essence of the main candles, the primary candles, that are the mitzvah candles, by which you're going to receive Shabbat, right? That when you light them, that becomes Shabbos, is the ones that are at the table that you're going to be eating at. And therefore, if you're going to light candles all around the house, make sure you're lighting those mitzvah candles that you're going to make the bracha on last, right? And then make the bracha. Now, this is another thing that's important. If a time of need comes, it's possible that you can sort of make a condition that says, I'm not yet taking in Shabbat, even though I'm lighting the candles. You can light the candles with the intention that I'm still going to drive to Shul, right? Assuming that there's time before Shabbat. So you put the candles sort of on a time delay, right? You still make your bracha, but if you're making this kind of an intention, it says in the time of need, right, as to when she has to immerse herself in the mikveh. Sometimes a woman has to go to the mikveh on Friday night. Okay, so if she has to go to the mikveh on Friday night, or she's going to a wedding or going to shul, or for whatever reason she has to do something, so you can light them with the stipulation that she's not taking on the holiness of Shabbos. We've got the lighting of the candles, and then she can say the bracha before lighting. In this regard, even a mental reservation is sufficient. No, you don't have to say it out loud. It's good that you can, if you can, good to say, I will be accepting Shabbat, at such and such a time, but I'm not doing it right now. My friends, I have to run to shul. I wish you a wonderful week. We'll be back again here next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.